Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we are going to be creating the first Firebase cloud function for our Chatify project. But before we can do that, we have installed some dependencies. So the first thing that you're going to have to install inside of your local machine is going to be Node.js. And this is the JavaScript runtime that the Cloud Functions framework actually works on. So you would have to install this. Once you have Node.js installed, and to get instructions on how to install Node.js, you can head on over to nodejs.org. Once you have Node.js installed, the next thing you can do is that you can go to firebase.google.com/docs/functions and get started. And then all of the steps that I'm going to do, you can have a detailed step-by-step instructions as to if you want to follow along. So without anything further to do, let's get going and let's create our first cloud function. So I'm going to minimize Google Chrome, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open terminal. So now that we have terminal open, the first thing that you would have to do is that you would have to install the actual Firebase CLI. So for that, all you would have to do is that you would have to do npm install -g and then Firebase tools, and you would have to put it in here and paste it. Since I already have Firebase tools installed, all it's going to do is that it's going to update the already existing Firebase tools package for me. Once this is done, the next thing we're going to do is that we are now ready to actually create our actual Firebase project. So for that, all we would have to do is firstly do Firebase login. And I'm already logged in into the account that I want to log into, and the account that corresponds to the account that holds my Firebase project. But if you are logged into a Google account that does not contain your Firebase project and you want to log into another one, all you would have to do is do Firebase logout. Once you have logged out, you are going to do Firebase login again. And you're going to click yes or no, depending on your preferences. You're going to select the account that you want to select and click on allow. And then hopefully you are going to be logged in into the Firebase CLI. Okay, so once we're logged into Firebase, the next thing you're going to do is that you're going to go to the directory that you want to store your Firebase project into. And in my case, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a new directory on my desktop, and I'm going to call this Chatify Firebase project. And once I have that, I'm just going to click enter. This is going to make the new directory for me. I'm going to go into this directory. And then inside of here, I'm going to do Firebase init. Then I'm going to select the features that I need. I'm going to use the arrow keys to navigate and space to select. I just want functions, so I'm just going to select functions, click on enter. Then I'm going to click on Chatify. Then TypeScript for my language, yes for TS-linked, and yes for all the dependencies. Now the command line interface is going to do its magic, and once it is done, we're going to resume the video. Okay, so now with the actual command CLI stuff done and the Firebase project created, I'm going to close the command CLI. I'm going to open a new Visual Studio Code window, and I'm going to drag in the newly created folder which stores all of our Firebase project files in it. So once you're done, the newly created project should look something like this, where in the root you would have a functions folder as well as some files related to Firebase, and then inside of the functions folder you would have the actual files pertaining to the functions module. Now what we're going to do is that we're going to go to our index.ts file. We're going to remove all of these comments, and I'm going to add this import statement, which is import star as admin from Firebase admin. So we want to import the admin SDK. Then you're going to do admin.initialize app, and after this I'm going to copy in the function which is going to be responsible for handling the logic every time a conversation is created. And it is going to be this function, which is called onConversationCreated. And what this function is going to be responsible for is the fact that every time a new conversation is created, it's going to go to all of the individual members of that conversation, and then for their corresponding conversations collection to it, add a document that shows that the user has a new conversation with another user. So essentially we are going to be automating the logic that we were doing previously manually, which was every time a new conversation is created, we would go to the corresponding members, and to the corresponding members we would add some data regarding that conversation. Now that logic is going to be taken care of by this function. So let me explain to you what this function does. So firstly, we access the functions SDK, and then Firestore, and then document. And every time inside of our conversations collection, a new conversation is created, and here we call it a chat ID. But I think for understanding purposes, we can rename it to conversation ID. And then I'm just going to update all of these chat IDs to also conversation IDs. And then we can do Alt-Shift-F, Command save, and just do Control F and chat ID just to find that we didn't leave any chat IDs. So every time a new conversation is created inside of our conversations collection, because it's on create, this function is going to be called. We get the data for our conversation, and we also get the conversations ID by getting the parameters passed in, and this is the parameter we access. Then we check if we have some data or our data is not null for our conversation. We access the members array, which if I go back to Firebase is going to be this members array. And then for each member, we are going to perform the action of getting the member, going to that member, and to his conversation, adding the other member's ID, and then the other member's information as well as the conversation ID. So the way it would work, first we would access the members array, and we would get a copy of that. Then we would loop over the members. Then we would get the current member with members.index, and then the remaining users. And then for each of the remaining users, we would first get the remaining user's data, so his image and stuff like that. And then we would check to see that, oh, we got some data. And then what we would do is that we would actually go to our conversations collection and then go to the document and actually write the data regarding the user, image, name, unseen count, and conversation ID. And this would then, once this is done, it would go to the second loop, and then the current user ID would change, and then the remaining user ID would change, and then it would go to the corresponding current user, to his conversations collection, to the document, and then to that document it would add the data regarding the other user's name, the other user's image, the unseen count, which we have to set to 0, not 1, and then the conversation ID. And we can do Alt-Shift-F, Command save. So now to deploy this function, all we would have to do is click on New Terminal. We would do clear, and then we would do Firebase deploy dash and deploy dash dash only functions. Once we have this, we are going to click on enter, and this hopefully should deploy the functions onto our Firebase project. Okay, so it took some time for the deployment to actually become successful, but now the CLI has actually deployed our function onto Firebase. So now if I open up Google Chrome and we go to our Firebase console and I reload the Firebase console, you are going to see that we have a new function that is called onConversationCreated. Now to test this function, it's really easy. All we would have to do is go to our database first, and then to go to our conversations, and then delete our existing conversation, go to all of our users and delete the collection for them too. So just copy this name, put it here. And then I'm also going to delete the conversations for our other user. So just delete the collection, copy this, put it here, do delete. Now that we have deleted these, I'm going to open up a new Firebase console tab. And then inside of this tab, we're going to create a new collection, which is going to be conversations. Then we're going to click on next. What we're going to do is that we are going to create an automatic ID for our document. So this is our conversations ID. And then inside of the actual fields, we're going to define the members field, which is members members. And then it's going to be an array. And the array would hold the IDs of the members. So I want a chat between Hussein and James. So copy Hussein's ID, put it here. And then before I copy over James' ID, I'm just going to create a new owner ID field, and I'll paste in Hussein's ID there. Now I'll add another element to my array, and I'm going to go over to James, and I'll copy over James' ID. I'll paste it in here. And then finally, the last thing we're going to do is that we are going to click on add a field, and we're going to add a messages field, which is going to be for now an empty array. And with that, I'm just going to remove the first element, and I'm going to click on save. So now we have a new conversation created. Now if you go to our users, for now, as you can see, we do not have anything showing up for our users under their conversations collection. But if you wait a few seconds, hopefully the conversations should show up. So now fingers crossed, I'm gonna wait some time. Okay everyone, so I'm resuming the video, and as you can see, after some time inside of our database, we had the users. The users got a new conversation collection created for them, inside of which they had the new document created for them, which the ID was equal to the ID of the participant they're chatting with. So in this case, Hussein was talking with James. So Hussein's conversation had the ID of James, and then the unseen count, the conversation ID, and everything like that. And then similarly, James was talking to Hussein. So in conversation, we have Hussein's ID, the document, and then it says that this is the chat they are part of. This is the image for Hussein, the name, and the unseen count. Now, if we go back to our conversations, we create a new document, and this time we want to create a conversation between Hussein and Tom. All I would have to do is that I would have to go to the conversations, click on add a document, click on auto ID, and then this time I'm going to click on the field. I'm going to do members, and then I'm going to set a array, and then the array would have two members in it. The first would be Hussein's ID, and then the second would be Tom's ID. And then I'm going to add another owner ID, and this time I'm going to make Tom the owner of our chat. So, and then finally the messages array. And then we are going to set this as an array. I'm going to remove the first element. I'm going to click on save. And hopefully this time the process should be much faster than the last time. And the more your application is used, the faster this process is going to be, because Firebase, after some time, if the functions are not being used, just shuts down the instance to save some data. But as you see, this was instantaneous, and the Tom got added a new conversations collection to it, and this was the conversation ID. And then if we go back to Hussein, you're going to see that Hussein also got a new conversations document added to it, which was the name and conversation ID. So with that, we have successfully implemented the logic for actually copying the relevant data every time a new conversation is created. And now in the next video, we are going to create the cloud function, which is going to allow us to actually update the last message field and timestamp field inside of each conversation document that every conversations collection corresponding to a user has. So with that, I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Take care.